Hello again, everyone, and welcome to The Remedy. I'm delighted to be with you once more on this beautiful Saturday. We have a wonderful show today. We will be talking about media literacy. As you know, everybody, every day, somebody somewhere is making conscious, I believe, either conscious or unconscious choices as to what is included, what to leave, and how to present what is included to us or presented to us as what we will call news. And most of the time, the decisions are based on the viewpoint of that particular person or that particular news network. And I believe because of that, the information that is shared with us is definitely going to be shaped by their opinions, by their assumptions, and by the biases, and as well as the media that they themselves have been exposed to. So this week on The Remedy, we believe that it is time for us to take a look at this thing called media literacy. And we are delighted to have an expert in the field who's from Temple University. I'm going to invite the rest of the crew to come in so that we can introduce her properly. So, guys, I want to welcome you to The Remedy. Let me see if I can do this right once. Yeah, got it.
Good. Hello, everyone.
Welcome. How are you guys doing today? How's everybody?
We're good.
Excellent. We're doing well.
Excellent.
Looking forward to the show.
Yeah. And those are the two beautiful DVL. What's up, ladies?
We're good. How are you?
I don't know. We have a stranger among us today, but I believe you know her very well, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about Professor Culver?
Okay. Well, today I have the honor of introducing Cheryl Hope Culver. She's a professor at Temple University's Klein College, and I took a class with her this past semester on media literacy. She also serves as the director of the Media and Information Literacy at Temple, which is recognized by UNESCO as part of the global network for media literacy. She also hosts and produces the podcast Kid Talk Media and the TV show Media Inside Out, and serving the international community on the topic of media literacy and how you can explain it to your children, things like that, for years through publications and her presentations, and as well as her traditional teaching.
All
so
right.
I'm excited to have her here today.
Thank you, Melody. That was beautiful.
Yeah. So is it me or
Thank you.
Can we hear them okay?
No, there definitely seems to be some static, some feedback as well.
Okay. So, ladies, I don't know where you are exactly. Is this the same location you were last week? If not,
Yeah.
you are? Okay. So we will try our best then.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the thing with technology, you never know. You never know.
Never know.
Yep.
And it's extremely stressed nowadays too. It's been stretched. It's so many. So the bandwidth.
We're all online.
Correct. So, Sherri, thank you again for being here today. Personally, for me, growing up, I didn't have to face what we will call the validity of information when it comes to going to the library and the books were already pre-selected for you by either the professors or by the librarian, and you just pick up things and you read. We didn't have the internet as our young people today, the wealth of information that is available to them. So today, at any given time, anybody anywhere can pick up their phones, their tablets, go on the internet, and have access to a wealth of information. So the problem with that, as great as that is, some of that information may not be accurate at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want you, if you could, please redefine or define for us when we talk about media literacy, or even when we say the word news, what kind of media is that? So would you define media literacy for us?
Sure. So first, thank you for inviting me here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Melody. That was really sweet. And she's an excellent student, P.S.
Yeah.
So, so let me talk about the definition of media literacy, because we're going to keep using that word. I want to make sure we have a common base for it. I often explain it in two ways. I have sort of the informal way I explain it, and a more formal way. The informal way is that I would say it is, when I went to school way back when, my teachers could not imagine me graduating from elementary school without knowing how to read and write. Like, that would be the basic skill set. And when you think about reading is really consuming media, and writing as authoring media. So if you think about today and all the ways that we can consume and author media today, that's media literacy, right? So it's the ability to consume and author media in all the forms that we can today. It's not enough to be able to pick up your pen and do that. You've got to know how to upload a video to YouTube and understand how the algorithm works in Google. And like, all of those things are part of understanding media literacy. The formal definition that scholars use usually is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and then act using all forms of communication. So media literacy means books, but it also means augmented reality and video games and movies and television shows, all of that, right? Those are forms of mediated communication. There's something between you and me. We've right now got the internet, right? We're not face to face. And so all of that is media. When you start to think about it that way, you realize how little of our day is not mediated, right? So much of our day, and not just for kids, but for us, for adults, we're constantly using media. So that the subset, or to me, I would say news, and what people usually refer to as news literacy, I see as a subset of media literacy, right? Media literacy being the big umbrella, because news is one form of communication. It's one piece of one type of information that we share. Sometimes it's breaking news. It's news that is happening right now. Well, at least it used to mean this. People stretch that a little bit now, but breaking news usually refers to news that is happening now, as opposed to a feature story or some sort of analysis, or a magazine style show like Meet the Press or something, 60 Minutes. Lots of the shows that are on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, those are news programs. So news is usually taking information that's affecting people in all the different ways that it affects us in our lives, and providing information about that.
So
big categories.
Yeah, but when we and guys, please feel free to jump in, because my mind is going all over the place right now. When we watch, for example, or when we go online, we tend to gravitate towards certain style of media. Is that by choice, really, or is that I don't know much about algorithm, or is it because the internet knows exactly what I'm looking for, so I'm fluctuated with those kind of things? I mean, who decide what I'm exposed to?
Yeah, can I answer all of the above? The question would really be that. So, I mean, on the one hand, you are an individual person with your individual likes and dislikes, and you're the one who decides. Even if you go to a website, you're the one who's deciding what you want to read, or read for 30 seconds, or read for 5 minutes, or a book you want to read, or a movie you want to go see. So you're making decisions. Okay, so that's part of it. But we, even before algorithms, so let's even put that aside, advertising has existed almost as long as media has existed, with people who are trying to constantly say to us, I think you should watch this, read this, do this, right? And guiding us either with high manipulation or modest manipulation to convince us, to persuade us to do something. And as the years have gone by, so let's say if we think about that from the beginning of, say, radio in the 1920s through today, all through these years, the people that are making these messages have gotten really smart about how to manipulate us, right? So we've learned more and more about where people's eyes naturally go and what kinds of colors attract people and what kind of music tends to attract you. And all of that stuff can be used to have you really attracted to watching a commercial and being willing to watch that commercial over and over and over again. Maybe even seek it out on YouTube to watch it again, and then go into Wawa to go buy something and be swayed to purchase the thing that you just saw the commercials about. And we're all susceptible to that. I don't care how media literate I think I am. We are all susceptible to that. And then the next stage of it would be algorithms, right? So now that we have the internet and it is all of the seamless ways in which it tracks us, right? It follows us online, and that it can, in the most positive spin of it, it can give us information that's actually useful to our lives and things I want to know. Like if I'm shopping for a new car, maybe car ads pop up, or it can be manipulative in other ways and getting us to think or do or believe or purchase things that maybe we didn't need so much. But it's very persuasive, and it's very seamless, right? I mean, we probably all had the experience of being online, searching for something, and then go, I don't want to buy that now. X out of it, go to another website, and all of a sudden there's an ad for that thing right there. Like, how it's in my brain. How did it do that? So it is literally almost instantaneous, and that's pretty powerful, right? It's like something in your head.
Professor Culver, you have, I think in less than 10 minutes, provided such a wealth of information in terms of media literacy. It is a topic that I find extremely interesting because, again, I think we all deal with it in day-to-day life and not really totally given that terminology or knowing what that true terminology is. And I think, like you said, you went into the scholarly way of it as well as the layman term and the persuasiveness, the high manipulation, and the susceptibility. I mean, there's so many times I'm doing something and then I'm a big fan of buying shoes, and then you get this shoes and that shoes, and I'm like, wow, how do they know this is what I like? Like, seriously,
I know.
How do they do that? And as you mentioned, it's been so seamless, and you're saying to yourself, no, I'm not buying it. No, I'm not buying it. You put the phone down and then you pick it up again to do something else, and by the end of the night, yes, I'm buying like 3 or 4 of it. And I'm like, how do they do that? And I agree that they do have a team that discuss the algorithm, their eye, and all of that, and it's well tolerated and it's a fine machine. I have, like I mentioned, I also have somewhat of a recruiting firm, and I've been talking to marketing people and things like that, and the pay-per-click and things like that. It's just a whole different world than just going into Biospace or going into Monster. There's a whole different world. Even within LinkedIn, people do not realize the true meaning of LinkedIn and how to get advertisement and the pay-per-click. It's a whole different world out there. In the past months or so, specifically the last 3 weeks or so, we've been dealing with, I guess for me, 3 hot topics. You have definitely COVID-19. You have racism that's been what more in the front of the line for us, and then you have the upcoming election. And we do know that media literacy plays an extremely important role in understanding the subject line behind those topics, and also understanding our behavior. How do we deal with these things? What is it that I need to learn? How am I supposed to understand what's been put in the media, in all different form of media, and use that to educate myself? Again, to me, there are 3 hot topics that I feel like I need a whole lot of education on. We have the COVID-19, which to some extent, some of us, including myself, I said, you know what, I'm turning off the TV. I just need to move on in my life. I'm turning off the TV. I can't take it anymore. You're hearing this here, you're in that here. At this point, we don't even know what to believe anymore. Is the virus still here? Is the virus not still here? Can you do this? Can you do that? And then you also have, unfortunately, the racism aspect that's been going on as well, where you definitely, we all trying to, at least for me, learn more and understand more, but we also want to get it from the right source. At this point right now, I don't necessarily know what is the right source? How do I filter? And I agree with you. You mentioned something about we all, to some level, have a level of susceptibility, which even for you that know the term, that's been living the term, we can all be susceptible to some level. So what is that balance that someone like myself, when I'm looking and trying to educate myself and gravitating, going to places to get the information, how should I go about getting the information that I feel might be the best for me and not just react to the first information that I receive?
Well, I think that you've like hit in the core of what is challenging about news, for sure. And a couple thoughts about this. The first is that we need to, in the same way that I just said to you a few minutes ago, I am working toward being media literate every minute of every day. I run into people who are like, Sherri, you must be so media literate. And I say, yeah, I try, right? It's not a light switch. I don't learn a couple things and go, whew, glad I'm done with learning about that. This is an ongoing practice that I have to think about because we're all susceptible. And that, so in terms of news and information, I think the first thing is to recognize that there is manipulation in any information we get. There's a point of view, right? Monty mentioned that in his open. There's a point of view to things, and that we need to acknowledge that can be really influential to us, no matter how smart, no matter how educated, no matter how old, no matter how young, we're susceptible to that. So that if you can open the door to that, that can help you to ask questions of the media that you consume and create. So before I even get to the sort of the detail of what do we do about what news source should I go to, I would say to you, there are a few questions that you could be asking about any media that you consume, any of it. I don't care if it's a movie that you hopefully someday get to go back in a movie theater, or news article that you're reading. You want to first ask, who is the author of this content, right? Who wrote it? Who made it? Who created it? Somebody did. I should know who that person is. Now, that doesn't mean that for everything I read, I need to do the history on that writer, but sometimes I might want to. And at the very least, that person's name should be there. If I want to know who wrote it, I should be able to know. Way too often, we read things and see things and never even look to see that the author actually told us who they were. Why wouldn't someone tell me who they are? That's a red flag to me. It doesn't matter who you are as much as did you tell me that you wrote it? So who is the author? What's their point of view, right? What is the point of view of the thing I'm looking at? Even a Disney movie has a point of view. So everything has a message, a value message. It might be talking about family. It might be talking about race. It might be talking about science. It might be making a point about safety, about family, about motherhood, a million things. But it has value messages are contained in media messages, not just commercials, but all the media. So authors, who the author is, what's the purpose, what are the value messages that are contained, what techniques are being used to attract my attention. I think if you can get good at recognizing when, when you said, Patty, before about, I really like shoes. Like recently I've been looking online, shoes really resonated with me, for red shoes. And what I've noticed is every time I go online now, there are pictures of red shoes that pop up. Now I've made a decision about the red shoes like a week or so ago of, I don't think I need to get them now. But every time I log in, those red shoes pop up, which of course, it's human nature for me to go, gosh, I really would like red shoes. And I am kind of quarantined, and don't I deserve something? I mean, come on. So, we justify that because the message is there over and over and over again. So me having the skill of being able to say, wow, look how they are showing me this message all the time. And I have no way of stopping it, right? It's just going to come at me all the time until the next thing that I shop for. And I need to recognize that is trying to convince me to make this purchase. So the idea of you thinking about the techniques that they use, And that can even be like a fun thing to do with your family. You could be watching commercials together. You could be watching television together. Why do we think, just asking questions about why did they put her in a scarf? Why does she have long brown hair instead of short brown hair? Why are they talking to each other this way? Why did we decide to have 5 people on the screen here instead of just one person on the screen? I mean, all of those were choices that were made for this show in the same way that they're made for every other thing that you watch. Somebody decided we should stand over here instead of standing over there. So just getting in the habit of asking about author, purpose, values, techniques, that could go a long way. I mean, if I could like wave a magic wand and get the entire world to be able to just ask those questions, that would really go a long way toward changing the conversation, because it's an awareness, right? So you're building an awareness. And we talk about asking questions as being really a critical media literacy skill. It's not my job as a media literacy educator to tell you what to think. It is my job to get you to think about it, right? As far as the news, I'll just jump in about the specific news question, is that there's a lot of information out now that is trying to tell people that you must check multiple sources for anything that you read, right? And that concerns me as a habit as an expectation. So would it be great if you could check multiple sources? It would. But I would also say to you, well, who are you in terms of what you really understand about this topic, whatever it is, COVID, racism, election, whatever it is? Wouldn't it be more worth your while to spend some time to actually research a few people or a few news outlets that were trusted sources for you? And those were the few sources that you went back to. And to make an effort to not have them all have the same perspective, but do a little research about who those folks are, and then be able to go back to look at the things that someone is writing or a news outlet is providing. And a news outlet that's reputable is going to have an editorial board that reviews things occasionally. They're going to make clear retractions when they say something that they later discover is untrue. They're going to be more transparent about a point of view. They're going to not use anonymous sources all the time. They're going to they're going to reference other sources, other research that actually comes from solid, trusted sources. When you start to see that, that can be a source that you should be able to depend on more, so that you can sort of wean down all that noise to maybe a small cluster of places.
Correct. Yes, Bello.
So,
Thank you.
how does social media specifically fit into how we consume news now?
Well, right, the research is showing that social media is the core way that people are consuming news now. And so I want to differentiate about something, because sometimes I'll ask students, where do you get your news? And the answer I will get is Twitter or Instagram. But actually, that's not true. Twitter doesn't put news out. Instagram doesn't put news out. You, as an individual, made a decision at some point to follow somebody, right? Some source. And it's that source that's putting information out. So what we have as a habit now is we make a decision at some point to follow some news source. That source is sending out short pieces or visuals many, many times a day. And depending on how many times you happen to check into social media, you might see that one article. So contrast that, let's say, with what I grew up with as an actual newspaper, where visually I had a view of maybe 25 stories in a glance on a front page. And I sort of scanned it and decided I'm going to look at that first. Now, that newspaper is still manipulating, right? There's still a headline, there's a cover story. They don't put the full story on the front page, right? They follow it on page 10. Those are all manipulations to get you to read things a certain way. But I could make some bigger choices that way. Now, likely if you're scrolling through social media, you're seeing one story and maybe just like the first sentence of that story, right? And that is clickbait. They're trying to create something that will attract your attention, because scrolling is just like nothing has more attention, right? If we're just scrolling, everything is just a wash. So if I am creating content and I want you to read it, I need to do something that gets you to stop. We know that visuals are what make people stop more than anything. So a powerful visual, and we could talk about what makes a powerful visual, but a powerful visual will make you stop. If I can get you to stop, then I want you to read the little headline. And the goal is for me to get you to click through, or probably more than that, even the news outlet wants you to share it. So the news outlet doesn't even necessarily need you to read it. They need you to share it, because that's how more people will get involved. So that, of course, if you wanted to write, if you went to a wedding this past weekend and you were going to tell a friend about it, you could say, I went to a wedding this past weekend. And that might attract some people to think about your wedding. But if you said, Patty wore 5-inch red shoes that were amazing at the wedding last weekend, and there was a picture of a red shoe, you would click right into that. So, and then you might get into the article and there would be actually a legitimate article about the wedding, but I need to get you to the article. And so we do this all the time ourselves, and we talk to our friends. We think about who we're telling the story to and what they want to know more than something else. That's what the news is doing all the time to content. The thing is, we forget they're doing that, right? We just consume it. We're not actually thinking somebody's back there, behind the scenes, figuring out what that sentence should be so that I will click on it. And that's a powerful role too.
So how does the media we consume influence us when we're growing up?
That's such a great question. Well, nothing is more, no matter how many times researchers ask young people, the same answer for decades and decades has been that family is the most influential thing in your life. Parents are the most influential thing in your life. A caring adult in your life is the most influential thing. Now, if you happen to come from a family that talks about news, double positive, because now you've got a group that you trust, who has your best interest at heart, who is creating an environment for you to work through what it means to have opinions about stories in the news. Now, families have their own prejudices and their own quirks and dysfunctions, for sure. But as a general rule, having a family that talks about the news is better than having a family that doesn't talk about it. We know that kids who grow up in families that talk about the news are more likely to be civically engaged. They're more likely to read the news themselves, whether it's on social media or anything else. So if you're trying to develop civic engagement in your children, a responsibility of what it means to be a good citizen, then talking about it is key. If you can watch something together, or just even everybody bringing to the dinner table, or even texting to each other, I saw this article, or did you see this on social media? I mean, just sending each other articles. Actually, my husband and my daughter and I do that all the time. Send each other little links to articles that we want to read. So I think being in a home that talks about news is key. And being in a home that values your children's opinion is also a piece of that, right? Families, there are all different kinds of families with all different kinds of wonderful, loving environments, and they're not all the same. So some families are, children are invited to be more verbal in those homes. And in some homes, children are, to be seen but not heard. And they can both come from loving families. But if you're you can find it in your family dynamic to be able to invite children to talk more, share your opinion. What did you read? Why did you feel that way about what you read? And that can start, when they're 3 and you're reading bedtime stories to them, that you read a story and then say, what did you think of that story? Who was the nicest person in that story? Who was the meanest person in that story? That skill is developing the ability to ask questions about the media we consume. Mm-hmm. So getting in the habit of asking questions. I did not grow up in a family that did that. I grew up in a family that talked about the news, but my husband was a news director. It wasn't until I got married that I actually was in an environment where we battled it out all the time. But my daughter has now grown up in that household, and I can see the difference, right? In terms of what she is interested in at a younger age, what she is willing to go research on her own at a younger age. So you have to let go of the idea that you're going to have children who think the way you do. That may or may not be what happens. But if you can cultivate the skill, right? I think to your original question is about like what happens in a household. How do we develop that? It's got to be part of the conversation so that your children are growing up knowing that it's important to you, and it's like so important to us that we talk about it at dinner or breakfast or whenever we're together, we have some conversation about it.
Sherri, we have a question from someone on Facebook, from Jimmy Charles. Jimmy would like to know, how would you define the term echo chamber when it pertains to news and social media?
Right. So when we think about an echo, right? An echo is when you say something and it comes, I say hello and it comes back, hello, 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 right? It echoes back at me. So when people use the term echo chamber, when they're talking about news, they're basically saying that I have some opinion, and when I go out to consume my news and information, all I do is consciously or unconsciously look for information that affirms my opinion. So it's basically me, shouting out my opinion and then getting back something that says, you are so right, Sherri. That is exactly the way you should think about it, which only affirms how I feel, which makes me do that again and again, right? It becomes a real cycle. When you're stuck in an echo chamber, sometimes you can, maybe say that another way. Sometimes you can be stuck in an echo chamber and not realize you're stuck there. That's number one, because, we're happy when people tell us we're right. We're happy about that. So it takes thoughtfulness to say, I'm going to seek out perspectives. I know I feel like this about racism, COVID-19, the election, whatever it might be. I know I feel like this about, I'm going to seek out some reputable but other points of view. It doesn't mean I have to change my mind, I have to like it, or I'm just going to try to understand, right? Seek to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can do that very consciously by, right, I'm going to sit down today and I'm going to spend 10 minutes searching the internet. I believe this about COVID-19. I'm going to research this other thing. And maybe you use my earlier questions to try to evaluate it. So who wrote it? What was their purpose?
Mm-hmm.
What are the value messages embedded in it? So it's not that it necessarily has to sway your mind, but you're opening yourself up to other ways of looking at something, and you're trying to use more objective methods of assessing whether it's a source I should pay attention to or not. And you might read something from, let's say I'm always watching MSNBC and I don't ever listen to Fox News or vice versa. Mm-hmm. And I listen to the other station, right? One's more liberal, one's more conservative. I decide to listen to the other one or watch the other one. It doesn't mean it has to change my complete perspective. I don't have to go from being one side to be on the other. But it might make me say, interesting. I never thought of it that way. I understand why someone might think of it that way, right? So I do think the one thing I want to clarify is I do think there's a difference between points of view and science, right? That I can, not to really jump into the fray here, but I could have opinions. I could have opinions about whether or not I want to wear a mask, right? And how I feel about wearing a mask and how annoying it is to wear a mask, and nobody gets to see my lipstick when I wear a mask and all the other things that are annoying me about a mask. But the science of wearing a mask is for real.
Exactly.
So I could read other things, and I'm okay to read other things. I actually I've read other things about people who basically say, I know the science says this, but I can't do that. Now, I may not like that perspective, but I do understand how people could feel that way. It's annoying to wear a mask. But the science of it, who is the author of the science? What's their point of view? What are the value messages? What is the source? If those are reputable, then while I may not like it, oh, too bad, Sherri, you don't like it. That's the science of it. So I think we need to try to separate some of those pieces out and be clear. People are entitled to their own point of view, but there are some things there are truths in the world. It's not everything is not subjective. There are some truths in the world 2 and 2 does equal 4, and we need to have a respect for that as well. So that's also, to me, a reflective skill, is recognizing when is it my opinion and when am I feeling like, and it's my opinion because darn it, that's just the way I feel.
Mhm.
And when is my opinion really based on solid information?
Yeah,
right?
there's actually a fight going on my channel right here between two people. One person is asking, Kels is asking, why does the media provide information based off thoughts and opinion but not facts? But someone else respond to say, um, well, then he went on to explain, for example, news channels, police press conference say things like allegedly. That's not speaking, I'm quoting here, that's not speaking from a factual source when you say allegedly. So someone else respond, I think it's because they're afraid that they might get sued.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on this little discussion going on my phone right there?
Yeah, it's true. So the complicated, the overlay of complications when it comes to news and information is money and politics. So in my classes, I often say to my students, if I ask you a question and you don't know the answer, you could pretty much assume the answer is always money, because the news industry is a business, right? These are, for the most part, for-profit companies that need to make money for their shareholders or for whoever their owner is. And a media literate person never loses sight of that, right? There is money that's involved in this. So, so when information, so let's just talk about opinion for just a minute. When I grew up, opinion was what I would call firewalled from legitimate editorial content in any sort of news source. There was an opinion page, and anything that was written as opinion went on that separate page. And information that was in the rest of the newspaper was considered more objective, where they tried to look at multiple sides of the story. They took all the information together. An editor reviewed it and decided, yes, this was a well-researched story and we're going to print this, right? Now what's happened is that, so one of the sort of unintended consequences of the internet and the ability for, everyone, including every one of us and everybody who's listening, to be a creator, right? Going back to Melody's point earlier about social media, we're all creators. We're all making creative decisions, posting pictures, sharing stories, retweeting. So that prevalence and that popularity of all of that opinion content in social media has had a really big influence on legitimate news companies, because they're watching. See earlier point of, we always like to be told we're right. We like to have affirmation that what I think and what I know is good, is true. So people are very drawn to those opinionated sources, because if I can find an opinion that aligns with mine, she is so smart, I'm going to go back to that source. And then you watch the news company losing viewers, losing readers, losing subscribers. So what could they do? Well, they're going to try to compete. So they're going to add some opinion content, and not just opinion content on the opinion page, but now, even if, so I have a subscription to the New York Times, I look at it on my phone, but on what I would say is like the home page are opinion articles. Now they're labeled as opinion, but they're right next to the articles that are not considered opinion. And as a reader, now I'm somebody who's kind of into this, right? I'm just a nerd about this stuff, so I notice it. But I think most people that are looking at that site and are just looking at headlines to read are not really thinking about whether that article is an opinion piece and this article was written by a more legitimate reporter. They're just reading it. It's on the homepage of the New York Times. So it conflates opinion and fact-based, right? Research fact-based information. Opinion can certainly have facts in it, but it conflates the purpose of that. One is meant to be opinion, one is not. So that can make these stories very confusing. I do think that's about money in the business. Now, what's the option of that? We don't want a news industry that's government run right? We don't want to take away the fact that it's a for-profit business. What's the option? To have it run by the government? We certainly don't want that. We want there to be free speech. We want people to be able to read and see what they want to see. What we need are more media literate people, right? We need people to understand that that is what you're looking at. You need to understand that when you click this, the behind the scenes of how it got there is way different when you click this other one. You know? So the opinion one is really, it's challenging because so much of what we read now is opinion. And let's just even I'll give you a fast other example. So let's take me. I have, a lot of experience with media literacy, right? I write about it and I teach about it and I'm involved in different organizations, but I have a blog and my blog talks about, media literacy. So I'll write different things about media literacy. Let's say you go online and you search media literacy. Well, you could end up with some articles that appeared in the New York Times or on USA Today or, some other sources that are considered legitimate news sources. And you might come up with sherrihopeculver.com and my website and my writing. Now, is it wrong just because it's my opinion when my opinion is really informed by a lot of experience? So that's where it gets really challenging. Sometimes people are writing opinion pieces who are really knowledgeable, educated, informed people, and they want to be able to speak about it in a way that comes from their heart. So they want to write it as an opinion piece as opposed to something else. So it's complicated. It's complicated. At the very least, you should, as a reader, try to be conscious of when something is labeled as opinion and when it's not labeled as opinion. That's important.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Culver. I'm very happy because I feel like I'm getting a whole lot of education about this area that was very new to me to some extent. With that said, you mentioned, I'm trying to piggyback on the fact that you mentioned we need more media literate people. Now, outside of, I know that you teach this in a college setting and you have a blog, what are some complementary media literacy platforms that people can use to continuously educate themselves? Because you mentioned some very good point about how we need to decipher what is the truth, what is opinion. And I think, as you mentioned, it's an ongoing process. How do we help people understand and educate themselves on an ongoing, all the time? Where can they go that is complementary so they can get that information and be able to educate themselves?
Great question. So here's a couple ideas. So there's a national organization called the National Association for Media Literacy Education. It's namely NAMLE, and their website is at namle.net. It's a membership organization, but membership is free. And in full disclosure, right, so that the author, I was president of NAMLE for many years, but I'm not on the board or anything now. But NAMLE, so you can sign up, and basically you sign up to become a member, and once a month you'll get their e-newsletter. There's lots of resources in there. It is geared a little more to educators, but if you're someone who's interested in media literacy, I think you'd find lots of things that are interesting in there. The other source that I think is an excellent source is Common Sense Media. So Common Sense Media started, and I think it's commonsensemedia.org is their website. Common Sense Media started a few decades ago as they started doing movie reviews for parents of movies that kids would want to watch, and then it slowly grew and grew. So now they do movies and they do video. They basically review any kind of entertainment that kids would want to put their hands on, but they've still grown even bigger. They now have an advocacy side, so they advocate around media literacy. They have an education side. They provide materials for teachers. A huge amount of what they provide is free. So this is not something you have to pay anything for. You can just go on and take a look at it. But there's lots and lots of information on there that I think you'd find interesting. Sometimes you have to sign up, but you're not paying anything. That's just, they're a nonprofit. So that's another one. The other is to your point about sort of how do we get people educated in this. Parents need to be asking the school, when will you be integrating media literacy into my child's curriculum? Because we've been trying to get, schools to do that. We've been trying to actually get it as part of the core standards. So you have certain, you learn algebra in 8th grade, and you learn, earth sciences in 7th grade or whatever it might be. We want to make sure that young people are being taught media literacy starting in 1st grade. And so what happens now is it's in some of the standards. It has much more to do with what the district cares about, what their things are, district, principal, individual teacher. But ask, because parents are very influential in those things. And if you ask at your child's school, media literacy is really important. What is the school doing for media literacy? Media Literacy Week is happening in the end of October. What are we doing for Media Literacy Week? When you start asking those questions as parents, they'll start incorporating it into more classrooms. And that's really where, if we want kids to really learn about it, we also have to teach teachers to do it. So it's happening, but it has to happen even more. And I have to say that, put politics aside, doesn't matter who you voted for in 2016. The reality is that the election of 2016 did more to forward the need for media literacy in the general public's mind than anything. And I've been working in media literacy for a long time, and that was like an overnight change, because the discussion of fake news and the constant using of the word fake news meant that people began to think about the fact that there could be fake news. And that led us, it was like an open door for us to say, yeah, fake news is actually a part of media literacy. And so it really has changed things. Many of the tech companies have gotten involved in media literacy now, and it's just a much broader discussion. Just the fact that we are having the discussion today is showing that.
I remember reading an article. There was a recent study that was done, and it was reported that 80%, I mean, the numbers is ridiculous. 80% of middle school students could not distinguish between fake news and real news.
Right.
And part of it, again, is because they base their news on Instagram or Facebook or whatever else that they consume to gather the information in this digital age. So I do believe, as you mentioned, that as educators or pastors or whoever you are, we have to pay attention to that, and also take the time to teach our kids or to teach the students how to be. I guess that's the question. What are some of the things you provided? Some resources as well, and I thank you for that. But what are some other things that we can do as parents and the home, so that our children can become consumers, smart consumers of information? I think that's the key word here.
So the one thing that's really nice about conversations about media at home, for the most part, kids love talking about media. They love media. It's not like you're going to say, okay, now we're going to discuss the Pythagorean theorem. It's not going to be like that. But we as adults need to meet young people where they are. So if you are in a family where they have an influencer that they really, you have a child who loves certain influencers, then sit down with that child and show me who you're following. Really, why do you like her? What is it about? What did she do? Did you ever make a TikTok with your child? Make a TikTok with your child, and then you could sit down and look at TikToks together. Look at the funny filters on Snapchat, because when you engage, first of all, you are opening the door for the discussion to happen, right? As with anything with parenting, you need to open the door for the discussion to happen in a way that is not censorship, right? In fact, a lot of times one of the other things you can do is invite me to come speak to a group like this. And lots of times when I'm speaking, I will often begin by saying, I want everybody to know right now, I love television. I am not here to get you to watch less TV, be on social media less, not binge watch your favorite show. That is not my job. My job is to have you make the decision to do that in a conscious way. So if you decide, gosh, this Saturday, really all I want to do is catch up on Game of Thrones. I was meaning to watch that series and I never did. I'm just going to spend the whole weekend watching Game of Thrones. But you know in your head, binge watching is not something I should do all the time. It's okay if I do it one weekend, but not a good idea to do all the time. That to me is a media literate discussion with yourself.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to open the door for the discussion and then meet children where they are, look at the media they're consuming, try to enjoy it, and then in that ask questions. It always ties back to asking questions. Why did they do that? Why do you think they did that? Why do you like it? Why would she have been wearing that instead of that? That's so interesting. That is building a reflective habit of asking questions about the media we consume. And that's at the core of media literacy. That's what we're asking you to do. Be a critical thinker about media.
I believe the ladies have another question for you, Sherri.
How can we tell the difference between real and fake news? Like, is there a way to differentiate between?
Yeah, I think, some of the things I mentioned earlier should be things you look for. So the author, those earlier elements about author, purpose, values, the media outlet that it's coming from, those are signals to me. So if I go on a website to look at something, or somebody has something in a social media feed. Actually, I'll give you a good example. A professor I know sent me an email last week with a diagram that had to do with media literacy. And I thought it was a great diagram. And I'd never seen it before. And I wrote back to him. I sent him an email and I said, I'd really like to share this online. Do you know where it came from? He's a professor. And he wrote back and he said, good question. I actually don't know. I was like going to hit him in the head from across the town. It's like, what do you mean? Why are you sharing this? You're a professor. So that's the first thing. So I've not shared it. Now, I don't share it for two reasons. One is I don't know the point of view or whatever of that other person, but also I believe people should get credit for good things that they do. And if I can't credit that person, I'm not putting it on. So if I read it, I want to know that there's a name of somebody there, not like CNN. That's not a name. It needs to say Fred. Like, it's got to have a name of somebody there. And when I click on Fred's name, I should be able to get to all sorts of other things Fred has written. If that doesn't happen, that to me would be I would not trust that source. To me, that would be a deal breaker right there. A person wrote it. Stand behind what you wrote. And if you're not willing to do that, I'm not reading it. So that would be one. The only exception to that is sometimes news organizations do put out statements and articles that are from the editorial board of that news organization. But you can look up who's on the editorial board. If I went to go look it up and it didn't show me who was on the editorial board, deal breaker for me. I'm out. So that would be one, is who wrote it. Then I want to know where it says, where is it residing? Am I seeing this thing this person wrote on social media? Am I seeing it on some blog page somewhere? Is it a blog within some respected news organization? Like, where is it sitting? If it's a place that I've either never heard of before, if the old adage, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. So, sometimes students are doing, let's say, a research paper on, let's say, Disney, and they want to write a paper about Disney princesses, and they do a Google search, and what comes up is a website, DisneyPrincesses.com. You know what? That's probably another student who wrote that site, because that's just a little too perfect. I would check that. I would want to know who wrote that. So you just have to be a little bit of a detective. If you do that, like if you were really conscientious about doing that for even a week, probably, depends how much news you consume, you would probably get a lot better at figuring it out quickly, right? And if you're unsure, that's another great conversation to have with a friend, with a parent, with a child. Like, what do you think, right? Sometimes I might find a source, and I've had conversations with students where they've given me a source for something they're writing, and I might initially look at it and think, that doesn't look like a legitimate source to me. But actually, if I click on about, here's another thing. If I go on a website and I've never heard of the website before, I look for the about or about you, about me section. If I click on about and there's no names there, I'm out. You know, if it says things like, this news site provides, the people that write for this news site collectively have over 100 years experience working for name organizations, trusted news organizations across the world. Who did it? Who worked there? If you're not going to tell me who, then they're not impressive. If they were impressive, you would tell me who. I'm out. So, and then you've got to be willing to like listen to what you see.
I'm listening to you, and I remember. I'm sorry, Pat.
Okay.
The conversation we had the other day when you mentioned the guy from who invented the retweet.
Oh yeah.
So, and in the light of everything you just said, before we retweet anything, we should definitely check the source. Is that what you're saying as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Twitter knows for a fact that, so I don't know the exact percentage, but it is way over 50% of the retweets are made without people ever clicking through to the initial article. So they could tell if you were clicking through. They know that what happens is something goes by, you read the article, it says, you know, I love Trump or I hate Trump, whatever your point of view is. And that person says, I know who would like to see this. The people who are, you know, who are my friends, retweet, and we just do it. And we haven't actually clicked through to see what it says. So that sometimes that just means an extra 30 seconds. It doesn't have to be, you know, a half-hour investment of time.
Correct. Pat?
Yeah, and I actually was gonna say the same thing. I have to say, it's all great ideas, and I just feel like people in my generation maybe would take the time out to do a little bit more of it. Because I have to say it does take time, and we're all so busy. The newer generation that's always fast-paced and really so impatient, I think it's going to take a lot of education and re-education. And also, I love the idea of putting media literacy as part of a core curriculum in school, because they're not as patient. They're not as, oh, I'm going to research. This is going to take some time. I'm going to look to see who does this belong to. And I don't see them taking as much time to do this, to be honest with you, as maybe our generation.
I think we got to be careful about that assumption, because I know a lot of adults who are really have very poor media literacy.
Agreed. And I think a lot of it is we just didn't know, to be honest with you. But once you know, and I'm not saying everyone, I think once you know, even from the aspect, at least for me, even from the aspect of I don't want to be sued. Therefore, I am not putting anything that I don't know about. So therefore, I'm the kind of person I would probably read something and not even share, because if I don't know the source, I really don't want to be sued. And I think a lot of my generation and older, even though they don't know a whole lot about media literacy, from the standpoint of liability, we're staying away to some extent. The new generation know more about us. But what I'm seeing, again, I could be completely wrong, and you see more than I do, is the quickness of retweeting and read this and read that, just because they're just a quick generation. They can do so much more.
I mean, certainly they've grown up with, you know, social media in a different way than we have, for sure. I guess I would say this: it's not going to get us very far to communicate to the young people in our lives that they have a problem that I don't have. I think that it'll be a much better conversation with them if the conversation is, I think it's great that you have access to all of this, and I think the ability you have, to be really fluid with gaining information is great. Let's just talk about how, when, why, and maybe you can help me because I'd like to be faster at it too. And that might just open up a better conversation for us. The students that I talk to in classes are very often very knowledgeable and interested in news, but their consumption habits are quite different, right? They're getting their news from social media and from influencers. So this ties into the other point, which is about time. So I think even though our days and our methods of news gathering might be a little different if we're, you know, over 40 or over 50 or under 25, the same basic, I would give the same basic advice, which is spend some time, you know, take whatever sources you're using now, try to make a list of what news sources you find yourself going back to frequently. And maybe there's 5 that you go to a lot, or 5 influencers. Maybe there's 5 sources, a couple influencers. Make a list of those. Then give yourself an hour one day to actually do a little, like, look at the about. Do they have an editorial group? How do they make decisions? There's all that information. If it's part of a reputable news organization, that stuff will all be transparent. And even an influencer is often transparent about, am I being paid to talk about this wonderful pair of shoes, or am I doing it because I just love it, right? They have to be open about that as well. So spend a little bit of time to do that. Once you do that, I think that's a habit that maybe every few months I would go back to, or a news source pops up that has an article that you really love. Maybe that requires a little background. But I agree with you, Patty. I think it's unrealistic to think that adults or young people are going to spend, you know, chunks of time for everything you read to check multiple sources, and that's asking a lot. So what's the option? Can you look at sources? And there was somebody, I know somebody had a question earlier about, like, what are those sources? And I'm often reluctant to say what sources to use because, right, it really needs to be your choice. And you need to ask those critical questions of the sources you look at. I generally feel like a source like the New York Times, Washington Post, those, I'm trying to think of some others, you know, CNN was on the list. Those are sources that are very transparent about how they make editorial decisions. And that's what I want. I want transparency about it. And truthfully, even Fox News, that has been, you know, slammed many times for being too conservative, they've been more transparent lately about their methods. Yep. And another really good source globally is Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is another one that is very transparent about their editorial decisions and tends to be fairly balanced. Now, Americans don't often think it looks that way, but it does tend to be a balanced view of things. So take a look, right? Take a look at those things. It can be fascinating to look at, like, the BBC or something, an outsider looking in at the United States. But that would be my suggestions. Take a few, research those few.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We do have another question from Woody. She's asking, can we talk about memification and how it has impacted media literacy?
So I don't know how many people that are listening to us or watching us now have used memes or know what memes are, or, you know, have laughed at a meme. But a component of media literacy that is getting more and more attention is visual literacy, right? There's more and more communication that's happening visually, and that's happening with emojis that we use. You know, if you use the app Bitmoji, or now you can, in your phone, if you have an iPhone, you can make your own little avatar, and that can do, right? There's all sorts of visual methods of communication that we use now, and memes are one of them. Now, what all of that visual communication does, any of it, is it narrows the focus of what I'm trying to say in whatever my communication is to a single point. But on the other hand, you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So, you know, I send you, let's take something even so basic. I send you write to me something, and I send back the emoji of the broken heart, 2 pieces of a broken heart. You know, you might look at it and say, oh my God, Sherri's really upset about this. This is heartbreaking to her. Somebody else might look at it and say, oh, I know, it's like so sad. It would be just not anywhere near as important. Or somebody who's recently been through a heartbreak might look at it and feel really upset about even seeing heartbreak. So a challenge with visual communication is that it can mean so many different things to different people. You know, memes are like political cartoons in a lot of ways now. You know, they can communicate, you know, they can make a zinger, right? They can communicate a really poignant point of view in a comedic way. And that, political cartoons have been very effective over the decades of helping people to see certain things, things that are happening in their lives in a different way, with a different perspective. So I think what I would say generally to folks is, if you are someone who has not played around with visual communication, you should. And I would lump into that everything from filters on Snapchat to, and if you don't even know what I'm talking about, for sure you should do it, to creating a meme. There are meme websites where you can like pick the picture, easily put text on it, and share it in social media in 3 seconds. So, or how you communicate even with friends and relatives, like add a couple emojis, things like play around with it a little bit and see. I do think that however old you are, as you get older, if you don't want to be left behind, you have to look at the ways that people are communicating and work on it, right? Spend some time in it. Ask people to show you how. That was how I first learned how to text. So that's just something that that if you want to be a good communicator, right, you need to learn the different ways people are communicating.
Yeah, I think we'll do one more question. This is again from Markel. He really wants to hold the media accountable.
Yeah.
And he's saying, how can we, the consumers, how can we continue to trust them or hold them accountable if they continue to provide fake news or wrong information? Valid question.
So two big things that you have total control in. So one is you can go on social media and talk about it, right? That's the value of social media. Mm-hmm. And tag that news organization, tag that reporter, and put it in there, and put it in there every day, every time they do it. Like, be a thorn in their side and make sure they know. Get your friends to do the same thing. That's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do is speak to their money. And that is never use that source again, and go on a tirade to get other people to never use that source again. You use the social media and use your it's money and the flow of information. And so you can have a lot of influence on that. I have found, even if, no, let's say it another way, a reputable news organization that has a reporter attached to a story almost always now has that reporter's Twitter handle, mm-hmm. right? It'll say @ something. And the expectation is that if you want to talk to that person, you're going to go on Twitter, write something, and put that tag on there. If you know what I'm talking about right now, then you should take advantage of that more often. If you don't, if you've never done that, then that's something you could spend 5 minutes asking somebody. I'm sure someone in your life could show you how to do that. And then try it, because I know many, many people who have gotten responses from reporters when they posted things on social media and tagged it.
Amen. Thank you so much. Now,
I do have a question, Wendy, if I can.
Go ahead.
So, Professor Culver, again, thank you. This is extremely important for me. It's been extremely knowledgeable. It's given me a lot of information. Now, where do you see media literacy in 10, 20 years from now? What are some of the pros and cons? Because, everything has pros and cons. So what are the potential pros and cons for a decade to 2 decades from now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in some ways we're living the con. We have a president and an environment right now that is putting out a lot of misinformation and miscommunication and inflammatory visual imagery. And people are not knowledgeable enough about how media manipulates them to recognize always that is what's happening. There was just a story that I saw, what does it say, Saturday? I'm trying to remember when I saw it. Maybe it was Thursday night, but I think the president tweeted something, and in the visual for it was a red triangle. And the red triangle was a symbol that Jews were forced to wear on their clothing in concentration camps. It was not about Jewish people. It was not the thing that he tweeted, but it was an unmistakably divisive tweet. Media, some media drew attention, helped people to see. Did you know this is an image from this other time?
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody reveals who they are in that sense, we have to look at that. So I think just being able to, it's scary. I mean, but it is. It's really scary to me. When you look at history and how Hitler came to power. And, some of us sit back and think, how is it possible the Holocaust happened? How did that ever happen? How were millions of people who lived there not seeing all these people, right? How did that happen? But it did. Right. But it did happen. And one of the ways they know that it happened is that it was a slow crawl with Hitler, with ever increasing divisive and manipulatory and racist comments and propaganda that got increasingly, violent and like taking further steps till the environment finally got to a point where the feeling that he had communicated over time was that Jews are not really worthy of anything, and we need to take the next step. But that took a long time. Mm-hmm. So when we see something from anyone, right? I don't want to just say this is not about one person, right? The things don't happen with just one person. Mm-hmm. But when we see something and it is propaganda and it is degrading. So right now we're having, a whole lot of things happening with Black community, people of color, right? BI, POC, a lot of the racism that is inflaming right now and triggered by George Floyd and everything. When we see that happen, and when we see the way it's handled in certain media, we need to speak with whatever it is we can speak with. So you can speak with your voice, but your voice comes out in your tweets, in your posts, in your social media. It comes out in what media you consume, whether you tell them you like it or not. I mean, we need to be really vocal. And a good example of how that vocalness can work in a positive way is AMC theaters. I don't know if you heard this. So everybody wants to go back to the movies, right?
Yes.
Cinemark theaters released a week or two ago rules they're going to use for their movies, and it involved, sterilizing, cleaning, masks, distancing, all of that. Excellent. AMC put out a note like 4 days ago that said, we are not going to require masks at AMC. We don't want, the statement actually from the CEO was, we don't want to get involved in politics. We want to stay out of the politics.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
So that happened, and the consumers who go to AMC converged on social media and basically, were pretty vocal about how ridiculous they thought his statement was. And this is not about politics. This is about science.
It's about health.
And right, we need to protect people. And yesterday, AMC changed their mind.
Oh, they did.
So,
I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yesterday they changed their mind. So who knows all the details? But I did see a news story in the New York Times that said that the pressure from their customers forced them to re-examine, and they made some other statement that allowed them to save face, but they changed their mind. So social media can be. I mean, a lot of what's happening, even with the protests, all that is due to the amazing gathering that can happen through social media. So we really need to be vocal, and not just be like, gosh, that's so awful. We need to actually give voice to these things in a public way to make sure, right? Because your question was really about what do I see in the future? And 1984, like past whatever decades ago, but we're heading. We are in a space where I didn't say we're heading. We are there. It's not future. It's now. We have people that are doing this now. We need to be vocal about it and not let people get away with propaganda like that, and hold them accountable and do whatever we have to do to change it.
Agreed.
I have to say, I am grateful that we are still living in a time where we have access to to the internet, and they are not. Um, you know how you read articles sometimes and you see what's happening in China, how they control the internet and so forth. And I'm grateful that we're still in a place where we actually have a voice. We can go online and as you say, get involved and participate in those things and hold the media accountable or hold those companies accountable. I love the fact that the moment that they come out and they make their statements, we write back on them and force them to change their minds. Just last night, I remember Patty and I we were thinking about this and talking about it, and we had a word of caution that we were wondering whether or not those quick turnaround from those companies, are they legitimate, or are they doing it because from a business point of view they have to, otherwise they're going to go under, or are they really doing this because they care about the cause, they care about what's happening in our world today? And the only thing I think at the end of the conversation, what we agreed upon was, um, time will tell. Only time will tell. We are in a battle, and if I take anything from what you said today, is that we need to continually stay informed. Number one, we need to, yes, check our sources, but more importantly, keep the ones that we are used to watching, but do the research behind those companies to see where they stand or who they are and so forth, and keep the conversation going with our children, with our young people. They have a lot to say. They are involved in politics much more than I remember growing up. I'm watching those two right here, Melody and Wendy, participating in a debate as we are doing right now. And I can't remember as a young person ever involved in anything remotely close to what we're doing right now. So this is a positive thing. I think our future look bright because our young people are getting involved. If anything, they are getting involved. Although the information sometimes may not be accurate, but at least they're involved. They're in it. And as they get older and older, they will be able to decipher truth from reality. So I don't know if you have any final words that you would like to share. And of course, I want to know a little bit about where people can find you, your blog, your website. Take it away, Sherri.
So I will say, I guess my two parting things would be, don't be apathetic about it, right? Even though I'm saying we're in it right now, and it's easy to look at situations sometimes and say, what can I do? What can one person do? What can I do? How can I help this? I talk to parents sometimes who this is not news related as much, but might say, oh, my child's playing 5 hours of video games a day. Oh, what can I do? Don't just throw up your hands and say, what can I do? Don't get so apathetic that you let it go. Everything starts with baby steps. Take a baby step. And, this whole conversation that I'm involved in with you now, to me, started with Melody reaching out to me because the president has put forth, or, I guess Congress has put forth a new bill that could potentially have some censorship impact on the tech companies.
Yeah.
And so now, where did that come from? So that's a person who saw something in the news. She heard about it. She's maybe a little bit more clued in now about different issues, but she heard about it in the news and wanted to talk about it and reached out to somebody who she thought would have something to say about it. So she reached out to me, and then we had a conversation. And, it just to sort of, it helped to, I think, just clarify how she feels about it, how I feel about it. So have some conversations. Don't feel like there's nothing you can do. There's always something you can do. And that leads me to the next thing, which is the biggest thing you can do, which is vote, 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 vote. I don't care what your politics are, vote. And don't get so apathetic that you think it doesn't matter. It always matters. Vote. And that's, and then try to get one person in your life to vote with you so that two of you vote. But you got to get out and vote and make change. We can make things change. We absolutely can make things better. You can make things better for yourself, for your family, and then for your community. and broader. Absolutely.
And Sherri, how if people want to get
To find me
with you, how can they find you?
So you can always reach out to Melody and she'll know where to find me. So that's definitely useful. And you can always find me at Temple, because if you just go on Temple's site and search me, that will probably come up. I have a website with a lot of my personal, different work that I do. Excuse me, and that's sherrihopeculver.com. So you can go to that. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram. I'm at Sherri Hope 1. The Kids Talk Media podcast. So we didn't even talk about that, but there's podcasts, and I'm always looking for kids to interview. That's a whole other thing, but that's at kidstalkmedia.net, I think is the website for that. Yeah. And I mean, happy to talk to anybody, specifically, but also it is something that I do, is go to other organizations and speak with groups. I mean, obviously things have been different since the quarantine, but that's a possibility also.
Well, I want to take a moment right now on behalf of the Remedy to publicly say thank you, Sherri, for answering the call, for saying yes to be part of the show today. I have learned a great deal. I don't know about you guys. I know Pat was taking notes. She's a good.
Yes,
I know you're going shoe shopping. That's all I know.
No, it's been extremely informative. Extremely.
But we really, really appreciate you. And before we go, I wanted to take a moment to appreciate another birthday. Melody is having a birthday it's coming Monday. So I just want to let you know, Melody, you are loved. Wendy, you were just celebrating your birthday just about a week ago, and now it's Melody's turn. We love you, we appreciate you, and we are so proud of you. You guys are going on to be awesome ladies.
And I have to take a moment as well. My oldest one is the day after Melody.
Hey,
so, wonderful Princess Ashley.
Yes,
having her birthday on the 23rd. So I want to take the time to wish her happy birthday as well.
Awesome.
And on Monday is
actually birthday.
24th wedding anniversary and Melody's birthday.
Wow.
Yay!
That is awesome. And by the way,
these are all good
things. I go again. I was just about getting ready to forget. We have Father's Day.
Oh yeah! Happy Father's Day!
Happy Father's Day!
Yeah, Father's Day
is coming.
Yes.
We get to celebrate all the fathers and all this. Dad, I know you will be watching this show, so I just want to tell you I love you. We look just like we look like twins. So he's my twin. I love him very much. And, thank you, family. Thank you for being part of the Remedy today. It was an awesome show. We have a lot to take back home to our community. And those of you who have been watching our show on Facebook and on YouTube, we thank you for allowing us to visit you at your homes. We hope that we didn't waste your time, that you actually learned something today that you can take back to your own community, to your own family, so we can continue to educate ourselves. Before we go, I just want to say, if you don't mind, would you close your eyes with me as we give praise to God? Father God, we just want to say thank you for using us in such a mighty way, allowing us to open and expand our minds so that we can better understand the world that we live in, so that we can make better impact in the lives of those who truly are in need of a special touch or a special hug. We love you. We appreciate you. We ask that you will bless Sherri and the rest of the panel and all those who are watching on Facebook and on YouTube. May you continue to keep us in your love and in your care. We thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Sherri. Thank you so much, Melody, Wendy, and my beloved cause. Patricia, I love you all, and we'll see you next week. By the way, next week it's gonna be, let me use that word, a hell of a show, because we're gonna talk about heaven and hell.
Oh boy.
Where would you like to go and why? So tune in next week for another show here on The Remedy. I love you all, and we will see you again next time, guys.